Bottom of the 8th inning here at Alexander Field. Score 18-8 in favor of Minnesota. Matt Geely here alongside Brett Douglas. And Brett, it's been Minnesota early and often.
All Minnesota.
It's the greatest spectacle in college racing, and I'm out here live at the Purdue Grand Prix track. All getting in their final practices before the big race next Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. Not all glamorous and gloried for these teams, as a lot of them have come from really dark places to get to the big spotlight that is the big race. You can catch all the action on race day out here next Saturday at the Purdue Grand Prix track, where one of these teams is going to take home the grand prize. Reporting for Fast Track News, my name is Matthew Geely. 100% effort. That is the expectation when you walk on these mats. This is Purdue Wrestling. And that is Luke Welch, redshirt senior and captain of the team. For some, wrestling is a job. Others, it's a hobby. But for Welch, it's in his blood, and he knew it from the day he could crawl.
I have older brothers, and they started whenever they were 5. So once they started, my dad let me go ahead and start rolling around. Once Doug and Chad started rolling around a little bit, that's whenever my dad decided that it was time to get us into the sport a little bit.
Doug and Chad are Luke's twin brothers, who were the first to come to Purdue and put on the Boilermaker singlet. Now passed down through the family, Welch knows he can't take it for granted.
It's something that I've learned that I gotta take great pride in, because not very many people have siblings that have wrestled in Big Ten, and not very many people have this opportunity to do what they love, and especially with family members. And the more I think about it, the more grateful I am.
With experience comes wisdom, and after adding 2 decades of wrestling experience, Luke now has some advice for the young wrestlers out there.
Say have fun. If you're having fun, doing what you love, then every day is just gonna fly by. I mean, if you're not doing what you love, then there's really no point of you to do anything.
But for Welch, wrestling hasn't always been fun.
I got rushed to the hospital, and there's a time period there where the doctors kind of messed up, and they didn't give me the medicine they needed to, and I had to go in and get surgery so I wouldn't lose my leg.
After winning University Nationals this past summer, most champions would celebrate, but not Luke, because shortly after he was diagnosed with a staph infection in his knee.
In high school, I had a staph infection in my other knee from an injury, actually, and I was training for a couple national tournaments, and I was playing baseball, and I just remember my knee hurting real bad. So I remember that feeling. I got a little worried, but I was like, I've dealt with this before, like I know I'll be fine. But then whenever it was something that felt like just kept getting worse, like nothing could go right.
Through this entire experience, Luke has always been able to rely on 2 people, God and his family. And thanks to the help from both, Luke was able to find relief.
I got in a dark place, and right after surgery is where it really hit me, where I was like, man, I shouldn't be here right now. Like, I need to get back in the room training. Like, it's my senior year. Like, what the heck? Like, what if I can't wrestle? What if something's wrong nerve-wise? But it was definitely something that I had to really dig deep and find myself and find what I want, and it made me tougher than then.
So back to the training room went Luke, and now he is putting the finishing touches on a nationally ranked senior season and a Purdue career that people will be talking about for a while.
But how I want to be remembered is as a good captain, good leader for my team, good role model, someone that put in the work and went out there and not only just put in the work, just not another guy, but someone that they can actually, almost more of an example. I want to go out there, reach my goals, so these guys know that they can go out there and they can capture theirs.
Currently studying social studies education, Luke is starting to figure out what the next chapter of his life might include. And of course, wrestling has a spot on the roster.
My older sister lives back home. She has 3 girls, so originally I'd like to go back home to my high school and work there.
As Luke continues to take down obstacles that try to stop his always aggressive attitude, he knows his Purdue wrestling chapter is coming to a close, and there is no doubt it is one for the history books.
The first time I learned about the athletic communications internship was through my dad, actually.
Meet Brett Douglas, a student at Purdue University and member of the Athletic Communications Internship Program.
Went to the initial call-out meeting 5 years ago, and I remember it like yesterday. I was I just fell in love right away working Purdue football and Purdue basketball.
It was that easy. Brett took a chance and joined a team at Purdue he never thought he'd be a part of. And it seems fitting that this story takes place where so many have been told before him. Katie Court inside Mackey Arena. Not a bad office view, right? Brett and other interns spend 3 to 6 nights a week inside Mackey working on social media accounts during games, passing out stats, and helping visiting media members feel at home.
This whole internship is behind the scenes, and you might not get that recognition that's on the face of your TV or social media, but it's the little things that kind of make this whole operation go. We have the opportunity to work with the television networks, and by doing that, we're on headset and we're literally in the announcer's ear and sliding them little pieces of paper saying like Purdue's on a 14-0 run, or Purdue started the game 0-5 shooting, but now they're 5-5, and you get that acknowledgement saying like, I did that, like he said it, but I did it, and it's just a pretty cool moment to be a part of. And then it's also really cool when you get the sports information directors in the office. They credit you with helping with the media guide, and they say things like on the bottom of the media guide, this wouldn't be possible without our gracious interns that dedicate their time.
It's not all lights and cameras, though. This job is about taking care of the little things as well. And most importantly, knowing when to talk and when not to.
And I remember my freshman year, and you hear things in the office and it makes your eyes pop, or you hear an injury report and you like want to tell someone, but keeping that confidential, and it's like a tight-knit family and you don't want anything to get out. Having that trust and developing it over the course of years, hearing such, really it's confidential information that doesn't need to be granted.
So, with time came trust, and now with trust comes new responsibilities. This spring, Brett is going to take on a new role for the communications team.
The privilege of being the play-by-play commentator on Purdue softball, and I'm just really excited for March to start and spring and the leaves to start blooming again, because our softball team is looking promising. It's a whole culture change, and I'm glad to be a part of that.
All good things have to come to an end, right? Even this broadcaster has trouble coming up with the words to describe that reality.
I hate to even think about leaving this place because it's so great, and this internship has been probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. But the takeaways from it are work hard, be the best person you can be, and really try new things.
He might not find his name on one of these banners, but he helped reinforce what legends of Mackey have built for half a century. Through the highest of highs and lowest of lows, Brett has seen it all, and whatever team he joins next should know he will be ready to play hard. Country, welcome to Next Point Wins. I am your host, Matthew Geely. We have a full hour of sports talk to get you up to date in the world of sports. Plenty of Purdue basketball talk with the recap of last weekend and a preview of Friday night's game against Texas Tech. But first, I'd like to start by bringing in our guest on today's show. We are happy to welcome in CBS sports bracketologist and sports writer. They call him Mr. RPI, or at least I do, because he was one of the ones who got that going. An alum of Purdue University, Jerry Palm. Mr. Palm, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I want to start off by just kind of talking about the bracket and the process as a whole, because you spend a lot of time throughout the year trying to predict the bracket. So I guess the first question, it's a pretty easy one. After the committee reveals who's actually in the tournament, do you then fill out a bracket?
Oh, of course. Yeah. In fact, I'm required to. CBS posts what they call expert brackets, and I guess they consider me an expert, so they want one from me on Sunday night right away. So I don't even get a lot of time to think about it. I just have to do one pretty quickly.
And how's it doing at the moment?
It's on fire like everybody else's, but the left half is smoldering. The right half is still in pretty good shape. I had Purdue and Duke in the Final Four, with Duke winning the championship. Purdue is, of course, still alive, although I think it's a much more difficult task now without Isaac Haas. The right half I had, or the left half I had Arizona and North Carolina, and neither one of those teams lasted very long.
So when you go through trying to predict the bracket throughout the year, you've done this for a lot of years now. Do you have like a set list of things, like a checklist that you go through with each one of these teams that maybe from previous years that can help you kind of decide around what seed they will be and what region they might find themselves in?
Well, there is. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially the process. Is that I look at these teams and the characteristics of their season and the kinds of things that the committee looks for, and essentially, in a lot of ways, it's behavior analysis. What has the committee rewarded in the past? What kinds of things are they looking for? How much do this year's teams have that kind of thing? And so with selection and seeding, it's that kind of thing. Seeding, though, is relative, so it's a little trickier because the competition isn't the same every year. But in terms of selections, there are certain things that the committee is looking for, and so you look for teams that have at least done well in some of those qualities at the bottom of the bracket, though you find teams that are flawed in some way or another. Otherwise, they would be higher up.
And speaking like teams that are flawed, I mean, every year it seems like we have debate about teams like this year, Syracuse and Oklahoma, making the tournament when you have teams like Oklahoma State, Notre Dame, St. Mary's staying at home. Do you believe there's like an overall flaw with this selection process that needs to be fixed, or do you think that the debate is good for the sport?
Well, there's always going to be a line somewhere, and there's going to be teams on both sides of it that could, the teams that got left out that could have been in, teams that got in that could have been left out, gave the committee a reason to leave them out, but you have to fill a 68-team field. So for me, the flaw is 68 teams. You go back to 64. But even, it doesn't really matter how big the tournament is. There's always going to be a group of teams that are equally flawed in different ways, and the committee's got to take some of those teams to fill the bracket. So it's, there's always going to be that debate.
Do you run into a problem with fans or people who comment on your bracket when you're filling it out that it's not exactly – is it hard to separate, I guess, between where your head thinks when you're trying to predict this bracket and then what you think the selection committee thinks?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the job, is I'm trying to predict what they're going to do. So, my own biases don't really matter. I've been doing it for long enough that separating out what I think, what I would do if I were a committee member voting versus what I expect them to do it's actually pretty easy for me to separate that out because I've been doing it for so long.
What do you think the top moment of the tournament has been thus far?
Well, besides Purdue making the Sweet 16, Virginia losing to Maryland, Baltimore County, the first time we've ever had a 16 beat a 1. And for them to do it, for UMBC to do it in such dominating fashion is probably just as surprising the margin of victory as it is the victory itself, because they just ran them out of the gym. Virginia never had a chance and looked just completely lost. Couldn't figure out how to stop UMBC from getting to the basket or from hitting three-pointers. They got a lot of good looks. They had a great game plan, executed it very well, and Virginia just had no answer and couldn't come back because they play a very structured style that doesn't, when you speed them up, they don't even know what to do.
Yeah, just looking at that team as a whole. And Virginia, it feels like that every time they go into this tournament, we are weary of them because we know they play great defense, but it's always a question of can they score enough. I imagine with years to come now, this is something that's going to carry with them for a long time, wouldn't you say?
Well, the reputation will be there until they do something to break it, Yeah. And other schools have had that reputation over time, too. It's not just them. It just seems like when they fail spectacularly. This is one way they did it. They let a double-digit seeded Syracuse come back on them a couple of years ago in an Elite Eight game. And, you could argue the two biggest upsets in maybe college basketball history, Virginia was the victim of because they lost to Chaminade when they had Ralph Sampson and were the number one team in the country. And at that point, Chaminade wasn't even an NCAA school. They were NAIA. So that's one of the biggest upsets in the history of sports. This is certainly one of the biggest upsets in the history of the tournament.
Yeah. Throughout the entire season, the story has been about the FBI investigation and some of these top-tier programs getting looked into. Do you think that had some impact on some of these schools when it came into the tournament? Because we've had a lot of top programs lose early in the tournament that were in that investigation.
Well, I don't think it impacted the tournament so much as it impacted some of these teams, their seasons. Like, for example, Louisville, who wasn't actually named in the investigation, but, people knew reading the original notes from the FBI back in September or October that Louisville was a part of it, and Rick Pitino's gone, and they lose a top recruit in their season. It isn't quite what you would have expected it to be. Arizona had problems this year. USC missed the tournament. Oklahoma State missed the tournament. Auburn is the only one that seems to have survived it pretty well. Chuck Person gets arrested. They lose 2 recruits, and they end up winning the SEC anyway, even though they ended up going out of the tournament early. It was still a really good season by Auburn standards and by what was expected of them before and after the FBI got involved. So, yeah, a lot of these teams were impacted by it. I don't think Arizona's loss had anything to do with the FBI. Arizona's loss had to do with not showing up in the second half.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Are you going to any of the sites for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 this weekend?
Yeah, well, I was in Nashville. I'm going to be in Boston.
Oh, nice.
So fortunate for me because we had to decide in late February where we were going. So I at that point couldn't even be sure Purdue was going to be in Detroit because it was just after the loss to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So I just picked places I liked or hadn't been too much and ended up getting lucky and catching Purdue's regional. And so I will get to see this senior class finish their careers however it finishes.
Awesome. So finish this sentence for me then. Purdue beats Texas Tech if
the guards play well. Carson Edwards struggled against Butler. They hasn't had very many bad games this season, certainly not since the beginning of February. He's been one of the best players in the country since the beginning of February. But they're going to need him to be him. Vince Edwards has to stay on the floor. He had 4 fouls, each of which was basically unnecessary, and really the kind of fouls a senior shouldn't commit. Dakota's got to play well. PJ's had a great game against Butler. Those 4 guys are going to have to play well, and then they got really good bench production. Matt Harms, filling in for Isaac Haas, did what you hoped that he would do. Jaquil Taylor came in and gave him some quality minutes too, like he did in the World University games.
Yep.
And it's all hands on deck without Isaac Haas. But Texas Tech's guards are really good. Keenan Evans is an All-American level player, and really, I don't know that they'll match up head-to-head much on the court, but Carson Edwards versus Keenan Evans is a must-see television.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, before we let you go, I'm going to give you 4 bubble-busting questions, rapid fire. First thing that pops in the top of your head, go ahead and spit it out for us, all right? So number 1, your favorite spot on Purdue's campus is?
The Hall of Music.
Okay.
I was in the band when I was there, so a lot of fond memories in the Hall of Music.
Nice. Favorite year as far as living? Where did you live in your 4 years that you liked the most at Purdue?
Cary Quad. I lived for 3 years in Cary Quad, which I really liked because I could step outside the door and I was at Ross 8 or Mackey Arena.
Very nice. I'm a 2-year Cary Quad resident myself. Number 3, would you rather have Matt Harms' hair or Carson Edwards' swagger?
Well, I have to say that on Twitter I get a lot of grief for my hair. So I'm going to have to go with Matt Harms' hair.
All right. Very nice. I think I would do that too. And then last but not least, in a 3-point shooting contest between you and Joe Lunardi, who wins?
I'm not sure either one of us. I think without question basketball loses if Joe Lunardi and I have a 3-point shooting contest.
Very nice. Well, thank you, Jerry Palm, for joining us. You can follow him on Twitter at JPPalmCBS. Go to cbssports.com/writers/Jerry Palm to check out all of his articles. Go give him a look. His stuff is fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
All right, thanks for having me on.
All right, that's Jerry Palm. We'll be back right after this on Next Point Wins.